Welcome to Off the Page. I am Will Cain, and I'm with Mark Krikorian from the Center for Immigration Studies, and he's all over the corner on nationalreview.com talking about immigration, illegal immigration, and we have been talking about the Arizona illegal immigration law. Now, Mark and I have been debating the potential benefits and negative side effects of this law. Mark, let me give you one more quick perspective I have. I question how effective this law will be in stemming illegal immigration. And to me, the metaphor that keeps resonating is it's going to be like bailing water out of the Titanic with a bucket. That anything we do, essentially, on this side of the border is somewhat worthless until we do something to shore up the border. Do you agree with that perspective?
Well, I mean, in a sense, yes, but no, I think you can exaggerate that because you have to do a whole bunch of different things. And there's no reason not to do them at the same time or do them cumulatively.
But is shoring up the border an essential component?
Yeah, clearly it's an essential component. And what the administration and, frankly, the previous administration have done on fencing is they've tried to go through the motions of building a fence without actually doing what Congress mandated, which is an actual fence to stop people walking across the border, something like they have in San Diego. Instead, what they've done is just one layer of vehicle barriers. They're like bollards, that keep cars or vans from driving over the border, and that's a good thing. But you also need to have a real fence behind it.
What are we talking about? Mark, are we talking about literally a 2,000-mile-long fence?
Well, it doesn't have to be 2,000 miles because you don't need it everywhere, certainly not at first. What you need it, for instance, in San Diego, it's less than 20 miles. And what that does is makes it hard to cross where the fence is, pushes the traffic around it, which is where then you can concentrate. Now, you might have to build additionally, depending on development and whatever happens. But no, you don't need 2,000 miles of fence. What Congress mandated was something like 700 plus miles. And I'd say, well, let's start with that and then see if we need any more or not.
Hey, Mark, is a fence scenario the ideal situation for solving it? Or would militarizing the border to some extent by putting the National Guard at strategic locations, would that be more effective than fencing the border?
The ideal situation is for Mexico to turn into Norway, so nobody's sneaking into the United States anymore.
Right.
If you're talking about patrolling the border with the actually existing state of Mexico, I don't know. I'm skeptical about the value of using the military. You can use the military for backup and support, and we should do more of that. In other words, transportation and surveillance and all of that sort of thing. But when people think of the National Guard or even the active duty regular military patrolling the border, they're thinking of something different. And my concern is, those guys are their job. They're not cops. They're not trained to make arrests, which the Border Patrol are. They're trained to shoot things that pop their heads up.
Right.
And we may get to a point where we need that because if and when Mexico actually disintegrates, that they simply lose control, the state loses control of its territory, we might end up having to do that. I don't think we need to do that now. We need the National Guard backing up the Border Patrol for a whole variety of support tasks.
And of course, okay, Mark, you were talking about the narco state that Mexico is potentially becoming. But let me just ask you this. So the ideal scenario, what I hear from you is some fencing across strategic locations along the border, along with Border Patrol enforcing the areas next to and abutted to these fences.
Well, they need to actually patrol areas with even the fence is. The fence is not something where you can set it and forget it, because every night, somebody put it to me once, every night Edward Scissorhands comes out and tries to chop up the fence. I mean, you need to patrol it. You need to respond to the hits on the fence because they have sensors all along it. Because there are guys who, make these ladders out of rebar. Apparently that's what they do in San Diego. They weld rebar together to climb over the fence. Well, people are going to do that. It's hard to do. It takes time. But the point is, you need to use the fence as a tool to slow down the bad guys, to funnel the illegal crossers, but you still need cops.
Do you have any sense?
Back it up.
Do you have any sense, Mark, of how effective that scenario would be for cutting down on illegal immigration?
Well, it's been remarkably effective in San Diego. I mean, San Diego represented like 45% of all illegal crossings in the border, and now it's dramatically down. It's not one of the top areas. That's why everybody's going to Arizona. But what you need to do then is you need to then do it in Arizona too. And there are some places you can. Some places the terrain makes that difficult. But yeah, I mean, it can work. It's just that we can't look at fencing as some kind of magical solution that if we just build it, then we can go on to do something else. It's one important tool, but it's just one tool for the Border Patrol.
Let me ask you this last thing about fencing, though. What is the political climate in the U.S. for the fence scenario? I know Jim DeMint just recently put forward, is it a bill or a signed-on statement that senators need to start supporting the fence? Is that right? And what kind of?
Yeah, I think it was the bill. I think it was a bill. I'm not actually sure. That's a good question. I thought it was a bill to try to get the administration to enforce the previous law that the Congress passed, the Secure Fence Act. In other words, to fully implement it.
Right.
But politically, frankly, the reason you have so much talk about fencing is because politically it's more palatable. You're not, in fact, interfering with any U.S. citizens who are of Hispanic origin, for instance. When you build a fence, all you're doing is building a fence.
Right.
In other words, it's probably the politically easiest thing to do. And that's always been my concern. It's the easiest thing to do, and a lot of politicians gravitate toward it for that reason. But frankly, there's all kinds of other stuff you need to do, and I'm just afraid it becomes politically almost a diversion and takes our attention away from worksite enforcement,
right,
better visa security, anti-fraud, all that other stuff we need to do.
Well, you're saying that it's the easiest thing to do, and you mentioned a whole host of other things there that you feel like need to be done along with it. It's the easiest thing to do, but Mark, do you think it will get done?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, haltingly, but we've already made real progress in fencing. We've got a lot more than we used to. What is there is better than the fencing that used to be there. I mean, there are some parts of the border that used to have just barbed wire to keep the cows from wandering off.
Right.
Other places, and there's a lot of pictures of this in the stock footage files, of these metal landing mat things that they put on the border sideways with ridges that almost make it like a ladder to climb over. So
right,
we've actually gotten way beyond that. So, yeah, I think our fencing is getting better and better, and we're having more of it. So we are, in fact, moving in the right direction.
Okay. You guys can find Mark on the corner of nationalreview.com. He's at the Center for Immigration Studies. You can follow me on Twitter at Will Cain. Thanks a lot, Mark.
Thank you.